Maddie from New York. Who are Shawn Michaels' 5 greatest rivals? I scribbled this down. It's very easy. Bret Hart, Undertaker, Triple H, Chris Jericho, and Razor Ramon. Those are Shawn Michaels' 5 greatest rivals. Dylan from Toronto, Canada, had a very interesting question. And this one was a little hard, but it was interesting enough I thought I would share it. He says, I've compiled a list of 7 wrestling legends that have all had their share of criticism over the years from fans and fellow wrestlers about their questionable in-ring talent and work rate. When the bell rings and it's time to go, in which order would you rank these legends based solely on their in-ring ability? Now, this is not entirely a fair question because in-ring ability can include your ability to draw money, sell tickets. In-ring ability can include any number of different attributes. Hogan would be at the top of that list, and there's none of the other 6 that are listed here even come close. It would be Hogan, and then everybody would be playing a distant number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But if we're going by wrestling holds, if we're going by the ability to, tell a story through the moves, their technical ability, here's how I would rank them from best to worst. Okay, we're going to start with the best, and we're going to work our way down to the worst. He had Mick Foley on this list. I'm going to put Mick Foley at the top of the list. He may not have been the flashiest guy, but Mick could work. He was more of a brawler, but you can't go in there and have great matches with Sting and Vader and Shawn Michaels and Triple H without being able to hold up your end, and he more than did that. So I have Mick Foley at number 1. Now he also has Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger on this list. Hogan and Luger, to me, they're interchangeable. I could go with either one at number 2 and number 3. I'm going to put Hogan at number 2. And I'm going to put Luger at number 3. The matches that Lex Luger had in the late 80s and the early 90s with Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat and Barry Windham, and my favorite would probably be the tag team match at Super Brawl. I think the first Super Brawl, it was Sting and Luger against the Steiner brothers. All those matches were great. Like, all great workers that he was surrounded by, but you still need to be able to work, and I don't think he gets enough credit for his early stuff. You go back and watch Luger's early stuff, there's some real good stuff in there. So I think Hogan number 2, who's another one, frankly, who doesn't get maybe as much credit from an in-ring perspective because he didn't have to do too much here in the States. You watch him in other places, Japan, people talk about Japan a lot. You could tell he knew how to work. I mean, he could work more holds and moves into his matches if he wanted to. He tried to be smart about it by not doing more than he had to. And yet still the guy had 10 back surgeries. So it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter. You get in the ring, you take bumps. The human body was not meant to take bumps. So then Luger at number 3. I'm going to go Kevin Nash at number 4. Shawn Michaels gave him and Sid their best matches. I actually like Nash's no-holds-barred match with Shawn in 96 better than Nash's matches with Bret Hart. And those were very good. I like the Shawn match more. I have Nash at number 4. Number 5, and this is where I struggled. When I got to 5, 6, and 7, I went back and forth a few times. 5, 6, and 7, I'll just lay it out for you now. The names on this list, these are not ranked, but the names he put on his list were Warrior, Goldberg, and Sid. Those are the 3 remaining names. I'm putting Goldberg at number 5. Like the Warrior, he had a rep for hurting people. Right? Bobby Heenan talked about that. He hurt Bobby Heenan many times. The thing about Warrior, at least he never ended someone's career. But with Goldberg, I always loved it when he would spear people in half, right? It's still the best spear in the business. Braun Breaker is a worthy successor to the move. Goldberg had an explosiveness that just looked great on TV. That could be a double-edged sword, though, right? Kevin Nash said that Goldberg's first 100 matches or so, he thought it was real. Everybody remembers the Bret Hart match, talked about the Bret Hart match many times. Bret certainly never lets anybody forget about that match. But there was a match that I think of with Goldberg. He had with Meng, where it looked like Meng broke his neck. He slammed him. He dropped this fucking guy straight down on his head. And then as the referee was checking on him to make sure he was okay, Jimmy Hart, who was managing Meng, he jumped up on the top rope. Goldberg grabbed him. Now, the spot was, you've seen Ric Flair get caught by Sting and any number of people when he's on the top rope, right? He slammed the guy down. Seems like a very simple spot, right? All things considered. Well, he grabs Jimmy Hart and he almost kills this man. Jimmy, like he threw Jimmy, but he didn't let Jimmy get the rotation so that he can land flat on his back. He just kind of lawn darted him into the mat. And he landed right on his shoulder. Like, he couldn't even do that right. So, I'm not going to put him at the very bottom of the list, and I'll tell you why in a second, but he's pretty fucking low on the list when it comes to his in-ring competency as an in-ring worker. I have him at number 5. Number 6, I have the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior would get gassed just running to the ring. But the matches that he had with Rick Rude and Randy Savage, those were top tier. Like, he could pull something out of himself when he was challenged, when he was in there with the right person. But his work was largely terrible. Like, nobody will ever mistake the Ultimate Warrior as a good in-ring worker, except people who grew up a fan of the Ultimate Warrior, who are, you know, their opinion and perception of him is colored by that. And it pains me to rank this man dead last because I like him. I like Sid. But I rank Sid dead last in number 7. I have Sid below the Warrior and below Goldberg. There was something about Sid in his prime. He just had the perfect look and the perfect size for a professional wrestler. I mean, it's why he got over everywhere he went. But most of his matches were the drizzling shits. When he wasn't in the ring with Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels, his matches were the drizzling shits. And what sold him dead last for me on this list over the Warrior, right? At least with the Warrior, if you ask me to name, what are the 3 best Ultimate Warrior matches? Like, on the spot, name them. I could easily rattle them off. Randy Savage, WrestleMania 7, Rick Rude, SummerSlam 89, and Rick Rude in the cage at SummerSlam 90. Even the match with Hogan at the Skydome, WrestleMania 6. That's not nearly as bad as some people make it out to be. If you were to ask me on the spot, quick, name my 3 favorite or best Psycho Sid or, you know, Sid Vicious matches, what would they be? His best match was against Shawn Michaels at Madison Square Garden when he won the title in 96. After that, I'm drawing a blank. I got nothing. He may have had some good tag team matches when he was doing the Skyscrapers thing early in his career. Again, I don't know offhand. I'd have to go back and watch him. I just, there's nothing else that he ever did that, you know, work rate wise as a match ever measured up to me, to that Survivor Series match. He had some good ones, a lot of decent ones, but like, I'm talking matches that have stood the test of time. I'm drawing a blank. Even the rematch that him and Shawn had at the Alamo Dome, I don't remember being nearly as good. And Shawn working that match with the flu, that may have had something to do with it. He was sick as a dog that day. But with Sid, though, like Goldberg and Warrior and these guys, it wasn't about work rate. Like, the question he asked me was about work rate. That's what we're talking about here, right? The moves, the ability to put together an interesting and fun match. But you got to understand, like, they were a product of their time. And so back then, especially in WWF, more so than the NWA, you know, with Vince, it was always about a show. It was about the characters, the larger-than-life characters. It wasn't about work rate. It wasn't about all the great matches that the Horsemen would have or the, you know, Flair would have and stuff like that. They were 2 totally different promotions, 2 totally different things. Back then, work rate was not what got these guys over. And they were all over. They were all over. Warrior was over. Goldberg was over more than most, frankly, in the history of the business. Even though it was a short period of time, he was over like nobody's business in WCW. Sid was over pretty much everywhere he went. What got them over was their look, their presence, their size, their charisma. Sid and Warrior had the wackiest promos. Goldberg had no promos. But he had a charisma, like, his charisma didn't shine through his words. He just had a certain presence about him. People thought this guy was a fucking badass. That's what got them over. That's what drew them money. So it's interesting just to compare the way things were then to the way things are now. Now things were a lot more, you know, work rate oriented and, oh, you know, they botched this spot, they botched that spot. You have all these spots that people do with all these dives and all these intricate moves. And yes, some of them look cool, but like you just get fatigued by watching it. And it hits you one day. You're sitting there going, what am I watching here? Am I watching a gymnastics routine or am I watching a wrestling match between two people who are trying to fucking kill each other? All right, isn't that the essence of what pro wrestling is supposed to be? Well, I may think that, but everybody has their own perspective on what pro wrestling is supposed to be. That's why people argue with each other and scream at each other online, because they all have different ideas about what wrestling should be. What makes money and what doesn't. That's the beauty of it, and that's also, frankly, the toxicity of it. Comes from all these different viewpoints and all these different opinions.